Hi, everybody. My name is Luke Thomas. You already know that. It is, let's see, it is May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, which is more an American holiday than really anything else. But either way, happy Cinco de Mayo to you. If you're celebrating, don't drink and drive. I am here in the offices of the production company that makes a lot of Showtime stuff. They're called Malka. I'm at the, well, here, see for yourself. I'm out in wait, god damn it. There it is. Good Lord, I can't operate this shit for, there we go. I'm in Jersey City, New Jersey, doing a bunch of work, and it's been a long day. We just put out a video for MK on Tony Ferguson situation. If you haven't seen that, you can go to youtube.com/morning combat. But here we are. I am here. This is my personal YouTube channel, episode 114. We always do this, or this is regularly scheduled, I should say, for Thursdays at 3 p.m. And then I had to move it yesterday, but then the daycare situation just evaporated in front of me, so I had to watch the kid, and which was great. I had a great time with my daughter. Got her a soccer net from Dick's Sporting Goods. We had a good time. But the whole point is I couldn't do the chat, and so here I am doing it on the road. And I tried to do it yesterday because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to do it today. Anyway, doesn't matter. Here we are. So we'll talk about UFC 274 and whatever else is on your mind. Thumbs up on the video. Hit subscribe. Appreciate it. For folks who have left a donation, I will get to your questions at the end of about an hour of answering them straight. And what else? You are not required to leave one, but if you did, I appreciate it very much. And without further ado, let's see if I can get this stinger. Ready? Let's see. 1, 2, and 3. There we go. And we're back. That did it. Okay, finally got it figured out. All right, so here we are. Without another moment's notice, let's get started. Okay, first one. Hi, Luke. I don't have. Oh, my glasses. Put these fucking things on because I'm old and I can't read. Ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Did you guys get your wife or moms or whatever, whoever the women in your lives are that need one? Did you get your flowers yet? If you didn't, go get your flowers. Otherwise, you're gonna better go get them divorce papers. Not that hard to get some flowers. You can go to the grocery store. And I had a friend. This is terrible. He only admitted this after the fact, and we didn't know this for real. But he actually did do this a couple times, not like routinely, a couple times. I knew a guy who would actually go and raid cemeteries, if you can believe it. I mean, just the lowest of the low. He didn't think anything of it. I was like, dude, this was in high school. I was like, dude, you cannot do that. Okay, it's like really bad. But some people are morally deranged. Okay. Hi, Luke. I don't have a question, more of a statement. My mother was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer back in November. I used your content as a way to disconnect from everyday life and try to forget the negatives going on around me. We found out this morning that she is cancer free. I'm a complete stranger to you, but I want you to know how much you and BC have helped me through one of the toughest times of my life. Thank you so much. Well, beyond great to hear that. I had a sister who had to deal with cancer twice, and she was able to get through it. So I know what kind. At least I don't know, but I have some idea of the kind of stress that this could put on a family. So delighted to hear the situation is better, and more to the point, um, that our work was able to bring you some comfort. So very, very happy to hear that. Thank you so much. Hi, Luke. Stand-up stoppages, i.e., stoppages of a fight in the absence of a knockdown, right? So they're on their feet, kind of wobbly or whatever, and then the referee intervenes, are quite common in boxing, but are very rare in MMA. What makes MMA referees so hesitant to stop fights like Cater versus Holloway, where a fighter is on their feet but not necessarily meeting the criteria for intelligent defense? Curious about your thoughts. There's probably one major factor that overall affects the culture around stopping fights. The biggest issue is, remember, if you're getting banged around in MMA where you're covering up and the referee doesn't intervene, the reason could be that partly there is, I think, a culture of letting stuff go a little longer in MMA generally. but more specifically that you still have this option of level changing. You have a wide open space. Like if you're caught in the corner of a ring, that 90-degree angle is, relatively speaking, quite sharp. You are truly stuck. Now you could be flat against the ropes in the middle of it, and they'll intervene as well. But I would say that there are so many more options for a offensive or defensive response in MMA that the referee usually has to wait a little bit longer to see if you've exhausted them. The other part is because boxing is more of a constrained universe, right? It's just punching above the waist. You can't even punch with the back of the glove. There's real restrictions on what you can do. If after 6 rounds there's a clear precedent being established of one person quite obviously getting the better of another, particularly if the situation's getting worse, particularly if someone came in last minute, late notice, particularly if somebody is new in their career, they have 5 fights, something like that, then you can see situations where the referee kind of just realizes we don't really need to keep doing this. We know how this movie ends. In MMA, because offense is so varied and because the fights themselves are so chaotic and so um, not just violent, certainly, but there's so many variables that affect outcomes. The referee kind of waits a little longer to see what's up. So there's just all these other factors combining it. But basically, the whole point of boxing is if you see a referee intervene, it's usually because you can just tell this is not going to go their way, and there's not much reason to think that that would change. And then you sprinkle in these other factors about whether they're young in their career, whether they took a lot of damage early, whether they're very old, all those things. And it just makes it a little bit easier to call. Boxing is chaotic. Boxing is full of swings. Boxing is incredible in a lot of ways, but it is not as chaotic as MMA. It's not. No matter what the supporters tell you, it's not. And so, for those reasons, that's why I think also if you're going to defend corners in MMA, one of the key arguments, and most of you know this, but for those who might not, one of the key arguments in defensive corners would simply be that, yes, all the criticisms you want to make would be fine, but the offense in MMA is so varied, and comebacks are possible at a moment's notice because of it. They're gonna let shit slide a lot longer. It's just the way it goes. This is funny. As a Madrid fan of Real Madrid, what were your thoughts on you knocking out well, I didn't do shit, but knocking out a formidable side in the Champions League like Man City? Do you see Madrid winning against Liverpool, or do you think Liverpool might be too strong? Uh, Listen, this is a very easy call. Liverpool is obviously a better team. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure that out, right? Man City were a better team. I don't know if PSG is a better team, but they probably were a better team too. But uh, so like the pressure's off, dude. I kind of was sure, not sure. I had strong confidence they were going to win the league, La Liga title, which they did. But dude, their Champions League play, yeah, okay, Benzema has done amazing shit, but it's been all over the place. And usually they would, when Militao is good, he's good. When he's not good, dude, he's a fucking nightmare to watch play out there. He's a nightmare to watch play out there, and you just never know which one of those guys you're going to get. So like to me, I'd never, ever, ever, ever thought they were going to be in the finals this season. That I honestly, if you'd asked me at the beginning, to me, just making it to the semis was them overperforming, and then they're the fucking finals. Like we're playing with house money at this point, folks. This is easy call. So in terms of like who do I think is going to win, Liverpool should win. Like Liverpool should absolutely win. But I just sort of keep going back to it, man. Like people often and I saw some of the commentary yesterday. I saw from Jimmy Carragher and who's the Venezuelan guy on ESPN FC? I can't. Is it Jaime Moreno? They both said the same thing, which I did not disagree with, which was when you have a team like Madrid who've done what they've done in the Champions League, the winningest team ever, that there's this you just believe you can do things when other teams really don't, and that's certainly true. I agree with that. But the thing I would also say is, and this is true. I understand people are going to say this is true of every big club. It is true of every big club, but it's especially true at places like Barcelona too. Actually, maybe not right now, but Barcelona under like Messi and Xavi and Iniesta and Puyol is, dude. Madrid's bench. Maybe not this season's the best example, but like there was a Champions League season. Maybe it was the time they beat Liverpool. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think Gareth Bale came off the bench in that game and then still hit a Chilena, right? Uh, the bicycle kick. Like, dude, the usually year over year, and individual years will vary, but usually year over year, dude, very good players live on the bench in Madrid. Like, obviously Eden Hazard has had a lot of problems, but Hazard, but that motherfucker is riding the pine right now. More to that point, like, dude, if Carlo Ancelotti brings, and again, they say Rodrigo in Europe, but he's Brazilian, so why isn't it Rodrigo? I don't know. So however the fuck you pronounce his last name. He comes off the bench, dude. He knows he has to make an immediate impact. He knows there is you cannot have a Champions League night, semifinals. You're coming off the bench. You're down a score. You need one just to tie and two to win. You cannot come out there and do anything but have motherfucking excellence, dude. Nothing else is allowed. And to that point, on the defensive side, at least certainly in the midfield side, Kamavinga coming on and just transforming that shit, dude, because he came out there with absolute purpose. Now, these are not the best examples because these guys don't have the star power. But dude, I have watched many years now of rotations on that Madrid bench, and you could feed you, dude. There were you had Asensio and Isco and James and Atroff and all these guys sitting on the bench. You could field a whole nother fucking Champions League team with it. So it's not just that these guys believe because they've won a lot. It's like, dude, if Carlo Ancelotti puts you in the semifinals in the 70th minute, you're down a score, motherfucker. It is time to go. And so, while I recognize that's a pressure at every big club, that pressure at Madrid to me is unlike any other club in that sense, in terms of being worse. And that's why I think you get performances like that, dude. When you come off, Gareth Bale has forget this season because he's checked out completely, but there's many seasons where he's come off the bench. Dude, Gareth fucking Bale's right on the bench, like not, yeah, he may have had some injuries during some of those seasons, but not the version you see today. Like he was still a pretty good version. It's you come off the bench in Madrid, you don't make an impact, dude. You know, you're gonna find yourself at fucking Sporting Gijón pretty soon. Luke, in a hypothetical scenario where the UFC divisions are suddenly made up of the current champion, but the top 10 ranked fighters in each are replaced by the 10 greatest fighters of all time in each division, all in their primes, which division is the strongest and which is the weakest? You can use the double champs in both divisions. So, an example, at lightweight, you could have Charles Oliveira and then a top 10 made up of title reign of BJ Penn, UFC 205 Conor Habib. Oh, Jesus. I'd have to do this longer. Um, I don't think that the answer would be super crazy. The only thing, it would probably be along what you would imagine. Lightweight, welterweight would probably have the deepest ones, especially because you'd have a lot of star power there at 170. The one that might surprise you, of course, that you should think a little bit more about. If you're new to MMA, this will sound crazy, but back in the old days, this was quite true. The top 10 in the way in which you're asking it for light heavyweight would be, dude, light heavyweight used to be the Kings division. I mean, all these guys were champions or stars at one point. You had, and I realize that the light is changing. Like when I do shit like that, I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what to tell you, but I would say, let's just go through it. Vitor Belfort, Tito Ortiz, Randy Couture, Chuck Liddell. You could throw in Rich Franklin in there on too, but not even thinking of the biggest names. Vanderlei Silva, Shogun, Lyoto, Rashad. Obviously John Jones, and the list goes on from there about who you could name, and the Gustafsons and the Cormiers, and Frank Shamrock would be sub that, but obviously fought Tito Ortiz. But the point I'm trying to make is, you would think, lightweight and welterweight would have great ones, and middleweight would obviously have some great names too. People forget about how good Murillo Bustamante was, but the reality is that 205 would have a surprisingly good, glamour-rich division in the way in which you have asked it. What are your reasons for not being vegan? You seem to understand that perspective quite well. The reason I am not vegan is because I have a hard time maintaining weight during eating vegan. I think most people think vegan and they think vegetables. When I think vegan, I think carbs. You know what I mean? Like if you imagine someone told you, like you had no intention of ever going vegan, right? And someone told you, if you touch meat again, you die instantly, right? So you're like, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to eat? And not just that, like the way veganism works, which is of course any animal products, no cheese, no milk, shit like that. What would you eat? when you think about it on those terms, you're like, okay, rice. I could have rice. That's good. All right. Not all forms of it, but I could have pasta. Pasta is legit. I could have fries, French fries, yuca fries, depending on what part of the world you're in. Stuff like that. So I think if you're going to get into veganism, my recommendation, I mean, it would depend on how your diet goes and what kind of stuff you eat already. Obviously, everyone's going to be different. But yeah, I had a bit of a hard time with that. You know what? I'm going to face this way because I think I can get a little more light like that. Let's see if I can come around this side. Yeah, that's a lot better, right? So then my issue was, again, everyone's like, oh, broccoli and eggplant. And I'm like, arroz, frijoles. Hi, Luke. Your interview with Gilbert Burns was really well done. Thank you. It made me think back to the Quintet Ultra competition that he participated in back in 2019, right, which I referenced on when I was on Rogan's show. Imagine a world where the UFC, Bellator, One Championship, and the PFL would send their 5 best currently in the promotion grapplers in the co-promoted Quintet style competition. Who do you think each promotion would select from their team? Which team do you think would come out on top? I would have to look through more of Bellator's roster at this point. But dude, like One Championship's got some grappling competitions coming up. They've already got Gary Tonin under lock and key. I believe Gordon Ryan, they've got him under lock and key. They've got Buchecha under lock and key, and they've got the Ruotolo brothers as well. Now, I don't think they have them exclusively, but I know on this upcoming card, I think on the 20th, right, they're going to have the Ruotolo brothers are going to be on it. The guys who don't know they are, Ty and Cade? They have very modern names. Those guys are beasts. So one might have, frankly, one of the better teams of all of them. Obviously, in the UFC, you're going to have just a tremendous assortment, and Gilbert Burns was great. PFL would have Kayla, which is great, and the Shoe Face and some other ones. But honestly, I would say maybe UFC would have the best one just by virtue of the size of their roster. But I bet one would give them a run for their money. I really believe that. Just speaking candidly about the roster. With Colby citing brain injury against Masvidal in court, do you see Colby being out for a while or even potentially end of his career? It seems the perception is Colby is out for a lot of money in court and is lying, but if true, this injury could end his career. Well, we don't know that he's lying. I mean, it sounds, admittedly, a little ludicrous, but we don't know that. We don't know what the situation is. So let me just first caution you against just sort of assuming that he is malingering. In the event that he is malingering, let's say in this hypothetical sense, um, yeah, I don't know how you could say you have a brain injury with active litigation going on, and then go take a fist fight for money. Now you might say, well, he'll get more money from taking Jorge to court and fighting him there than he would fighting whoever the fuck on ABC, and that might be true. But hey, there's really, I mean, if you fight win or lose, you get paid. I mean, you may not get paid as much as you want, but you do get paid. And uh, it's sort of a guarantee. It's not a guarantee, but nothing's a guarantee. But it's a fairly, it's a followable process. This seems, again, we are assuming under the hypothetical sense that he is malingering. That is a very speculative and risky thing to do. Not least of which is, the fact that you may not win. But then if you don't win, you are still on the hook for all your lawyers' fees and everything else. And then your rival goes off and does what he does. I suppose that there wouldn't be any issue if he lost the case and then wanted to resume. But dude, this could drag on for a while. Like, I don't quite know. I don't really know what the game is there because I can see that if he has a legitimate injury, then in this way that he's describing, which admittedly sounds implausible, but again, I'm not a doctor. You're not a doctor. Let's see what the evidence is what I would say. One of the I've said this before. If you guys have never believed me on this, I really want to hammer this home. I live in a very small city. People don't realize that Washington D.C. is a top 10 market by virtue of everyone in the surrounding area, but the city itself is, I think, less than 800,000 people, potentially even less than seven. It's very, very small. And so but there's all kinds of court systems through there. There's you can be on a petit jury. There's federal grand juries you can be on. There's district courts there. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. So if you get called up for this stuff, you can be on juries all the time. So I've done a lot of jury duty there, and I have to say the one thing I do appreciate. I mean, I'm not saying our justice system is perfect, far from it. But the one thing I did like about it was that when you're arguing these cases, and then when you're asked as a juror to then decide the guilt or innocence or whatever it may be, that you have to just rely on what the established facts are, and that both sides have to agree what the facts are, and then you're allowed to make different interpretations about what they entail. I really kind of like that. So I am very curious to see what the established facts end up being in a situation where Colby is citing brain injury, unless what he's trying to do is just force a settlement out of Jorge. But I'm going to guess Jorge doesn't want to settle with him. So I don't really know. I don't really know what the hell's going to happen here. Luke, what is your favorite submission technique? Probably, probably a good strong Kimura. I like a good Kimura. Is there a submission that hasn't happened that you'd like to see? Someone is going to get the first buggy choke in the UFC. Someone's going to get it. It's already happened in regional MMA. It's happened on some other shows. It's coming. Speaking of the Ruotolo brothers, they're masters of it. So that's coming. By the way, I'm from Valdosta, Georgia. Hey! I went my freshman and sophomore years. I went to Valdosta High School. Um, glad I moved. Glad I moved. Valdosta was cool. It's just a football crazy place. They have the Netflix show about it. It's either you play football there or you don't. They're really the issue. Someone's asking me about groin injury exercises. I'm not the guy for that. Luke, you recently joked that there aren't any high points in your career. I was wondering what are some low points that you can look back on and laugh at. Laugh at. There are some I cannot laugh at. I can obviously laugh at the John Jones thing at this point. It's pretty funny. To dunking on me at the what was it, the UFC 214 media day press conference? I think it was 214, whatever it was, July of 2017. That's a low point. What's another low point? I don't know if I'm ready to laugh at it, although it's certainly not the end of the world or anything. But my exit from Vox, one day I'll tell that story. But like the actual exit and how it went down, I won't tell that story today. But that was not I didn't do anything, but you know I'll tell that story one day. I mean, the MMA hour, the MMA beat stuff. Like I don't know if I call them low points because I'm glad I did them for what they were. But that year where I was doing both and coming up and down in New York City and trying to do the impossible in every way, that was a terrible year. Terrible year. I was disappointed when Spike TV didn't renew MMA Uncensored Live. I didn't think that they would. I was not under any illusion that they would. But you hoped. You hoped. Um, my local radio show was fine for what it was, and I think I had delusions about what it could be, and it never sort of became that. But looking back on it, I was, sort of silly thoughts about it all. Um, but listen, it's not like I've had like a string of that I'm aware of anyway, a string of horribly embarrassing defeats. I mean, I had a few of them. Of course, they're for me have been impossible to avoid. But um, oh, the time that I dealt with a guy, I don't know if you know if he still even works with Nick Diaz. But the time that this dude who at the time was working with Nick Diaz had promised us both Diaz brothers in the studio and then just flaked on us. That was bad. That was bad. That was a real bad one. But now I just like if interviews happen, great. If they don't, great too. I don't really care. Luke, you previously mentioned high rollers jiu-jitsu practice. My understanding is that participants smoke weed, then roll together, and the influence of the weed would inspire creativity. I mean, I'm not really sure how much creativity it inspires. I've heard anecdotal evidence that this is true, but I don't know that there's any like real world evidence of that. Obviously, people have had a lot of creative thoughts on drugs, but I don't know beyond anecdotal testaments that there's any evidence to support those claims. So my local boxing gym has introduced an elevated boxing class using the same concept. I got to tell you, man, I've not done a lot of boxing. I trained at a boxing gym for 2 years, which is very, very little. Boy, that was very difficult enough. Uh, Sober, much less. I could not. I mean, listen. Some people claim that they can smoke weed and then jujitsu's better, and they go to the gym and they can lift weights. That's not for me. And they're like, oh, try indica, try sativa, try a blend. Yeah, fellas, ladies, I've tried them. Trust me. Trying the stuff is not my issue. I can. Don't worry, base is covered. But it doesn't. I don't have that. I don't have that kind of relationship with that. Now I can go on like long walks. I've done like 3, 4 mile, 5 mile walks at times. You know, under the influence of marijuana, I've done that, and then that was really great. And the sort of the peripatetic act of walking is it is good for creativity. But like again, it's like what was really creative there? Was it the walking, which we already know can stir interesting thoughts that way, or was it the drugs? Or I mean, some people claim they can do all that nonsense, man. They claim that they can go out there and just have the time of their lives, and they get the best version of themselves. God bless them. I'm not telling you that they're wrong. I'm just telling you I am not that guy at all. Luke, I know we haven't seen it happen yet, but after being in this many wars, one day Gaethje's chin eventually will go. With that being said, I find it sadly ironic that Gaethje's criticism of Oliveira has been that he's tapped his strikes in the past when tapping to avoid extra damage will give him more longevity than Justin will have with his style. Do you agree with this, or is there more of a difference between avoiding more damage and quitting that I'm seeing? George St. Pierre tapped to Matt Serra for that very reason. George St. Pierre made it explicit that that was why he did it. He was explicit. It's a strategic call. People can put whatever culture of shame they want on it. It's an entirely rational thing to do, and frankly, in the case of St. Pierre, best practices. So no, in that sense, I don't care. But I want to say this: it might be true that Justin Gaethje has more innate resolve. That pound for pound, person for person, he's got the kind of will that Oliveira doesn't and never will have. And fine, I can accept that as potentially being true. That seems at least at a bare minimum plausible. Right? But what I would say is that whatever else might be different naturally between them, it is also true that Justin's style, in order for it to work, demands that he does. Now, you could say, oh, that would be true of any style because eventually someone's going to encounter difficulty, right? But Justin's style runs headlong into difficulty. It seeks the difficulty and then seeks to break it through will. Will is actually, in many ways, the most significant active component to his offense. You can't implement that style unless you have extraordinary will and you're willing to employ it that way. Ju- Maybe it is true that Oliveira doesn't have that same level of innate will. Maybe that's true, but he also doesn't need it to have quite literally a higher level of achievement. Now we'll see what happens on Saturday. Justin's reformation, I think, is real, and how much he's improved, and how good he's become, and how cerebral he's become. I think is also clearly part of the story. I mean, we will see if he wins. This fight is very, very close, but I'm just saying to this point, Oliveira's achieved more with less will. So you begin to ask, what is the value of will? Now, clearly, the value of will is extraordinary. It can make or break people in the most important of times. But it is also true that by itself, even in large quantities, it can do remarkable things. But it actually cannot do, unless it is accompanied by extreme tactical skill, it cannot do what much less will, plus a lot of tactical skill, tactics and skill, I should say, can get you. So, like these comments about quitting, and your question was specifically about his chin and having longevity. My point about this is like it's not just that it's clearly obvious that if you tap the strikes, you'll have more longevity over time. Although I will say that like part of fighting is also rejecting the urge for that. There's a time and a place for it. It has to be quite minimal. It's not like you could do it every time or whatever. The point I'm trying to make is that uh, in speaking about Justin Style, I mean, we all love it. I love it. You love it. I mean, it's just tremendous. Like he is a bolt of lightning. It's incredible. Um, I just want to point out that there's a what accounts for success, not just in terms of achievement, but in lessening damage. It's this competing balance of goods. It's not really people tend to focus on in fight games, one or two very important, maybe in some ways the most important skills or traits without really acknowledging that even if you're the most important, there are so many other factors that one has to balance and account for that there's an overrepresentation of its significance. So, to answer the question, do you agree with this, or is there more of a difference between avoiding more damage and quitting that I'm seeing? What I would say is that yes, I think Justin Style, although his newer version, I think we really got to be fair, is very, very cerebral. But to the point that you're raising, to me, it seems like how did you put it? Difference between avoiding more damage than and quitting than I'm seeing. Well, there's sort of like avoiding more damage just means also defense. Like it doesn't just mean getting out of the way. So that there's a difficulty in navigating that space. But I guess I'm just trying to point out like everyone in this particular case, willing your way through that a lot of times will be really important, and a lot of times it won't be. I just feel like there's a lot of this headstrong, drive forward attitude that defines how we talk about fighting and fighting success when in fact it is among other things not nearly as important in terms of the um, in terms of outcomes that we say it is. So do you agree with this that yeah, Justin's style will probably well yes, but here's the thing, it's like Justin's style is much better now and he's got that baked in damage, but Oliveira's got a lot of baked in damage too. But style for style, yes, obviously it just invites more difficulty down the road. But I just want to point out there's a bit of a sort of a side debate. I kind of tried to intertwine them, I think, incapably just now, but um, I do want to make that point that there is all this talk about like quitting and not quitting. It's like, dude, do I think that Oliveira might quit before Gaethje ever would? For sure. But what does that mean ultimately in terms of how we assess fighters when we look at the full, not just length of their resume, but the various traits that they possess and the various skills that they possess and how those correlate and actually correspond directly to successful outcomes? We're just overrepresenting what all this stuff means. Is there any scientific evidence to back up the claim that body shots drain someone's gas tank? Yeah, I don't know to what extent there are studies that measure um, intra-fight organ damage as contributing to a reduction in cardiovascular conditioning. But anytime, my understanding of it all is, and I've experienced this a little bit, and I say a little bit, I mean just a little bit, nothing in any kind of meaningful way. It makes it hard to breathe. Not only is it painful, especially if you get hit in the liver, which the liver is coated in nerves, which is what makes it hurt so bad. That's not a very good medical explanation, but it gives you a sense of why that organ is so sensitive. But the other part is when you get hit to the body a lot, um, it not only causes pain, but it makes breathing much more labored. Um, so, and of course, you can cause organ damage. You can break ribs or whatever the case. What's the biggest difference that separates an amateur from a professional? Well, one gets paid. You know what? In MMA, it's not so. The reason why this question is important is because the division is not so clear. So, one of the areas of MMA currently, and this is still a very big problem without an obvious solution in terms of how you would fix this, there boxing has tied its amateur system to essentially the Olympics. Now, there's more than just that. Of course, there's the Golden Gloves and everything else, but there's a real amateurism system internationally. There's an architecture for the sport, and everything begins to feed into that. And it starts at a very early age and has a real clear sense of graduation. In MMA, there's really none of that. Now, there are organizations working on that. There's CAMO, which is an acronym for an entity in California. Obviously, there's the was it IMMAF, something like that, that's working on an amateur system. Mokayev has come out of them. but it's very all still in its nascent stages. And so what ends up happening for most guys, like if you were 21 years old and you went to an MMA gym and you said, I want to learn jiu-jitsu and I want to fight MMA, and you stayed there for a couple of years, even in a couple of years' time, what's going to end up happening is you're going to go to some local-ish promoter who puts on amateur shows, and amateur MMA in their state will either be not regulated or it will be minimally regulated. You won't get very good judges. You won't get very good referees. I have called an amateur fight before where after the fact it was revealed to me that one of the participants was a teammate with the referee of his own fight. So you would get these conflicts of interest. Amateur MMA is relative to amateur boxing profoundly unregulated. Now, of course, for amateurs, in no way would they make money anyway. That would be pretty consistent. But you're asking like, why is there all these amateur shows if I thought MMA was running towards regulation. Well, professional, high level, elite MMA ran towards regulation. Everyone else ran the other way. Because if you want to make money in MMA, think about it. You could get people on your shows. I think I called Sadiq Yusuf's a couple of his amateur fights, right? I can tell you the difference between Sadiq Yusuf as an amateur and as a UFC pro. Obviously, it is significant, but it wasn't huge because what ends up happening is these guys have to take amateur fights just to get fighting experience, period, even well past the point where you would consider what their skill set amateurish in nature, whatever that would be defined and designed to mean. And so as a consequence, these promoters, think about it. You're a promoter in, I'll make up a state, North Carolina. I don't know what the regulatory mechanism looks like. But imagine MMA and the amateur system is either barely or not regulated at all. You could put on a show without much commission oversight, which means you could probably cut costs already. You don't have to pay any of the fighters because they're all amateurs. And they might be good enough to be like a decent pro already. So the action actually might not be that bad. Like it could, under certain circumstances, it can work really, really well. And there's a lot of that around in a lot of places. And so when MMA fans ask, what's the difference between an amateur and a pro? It's a great question because in MMA there candidly probably isn't one in a lot of cases. You would get somebody in the amateur system who is, has been ready for a pro fight probably for a long time and just couldn't get one. Or it can work the opposite too. There are cases where because there isn't a formal system that folks graduate from, you can get people who are first fight is their pro debut. They don't even have an amateur system. So they, you look at their record early. And it's like, how'd you lose 3 of your first 5 fights? Those might be the only fights they've ever had. They didn't have. They may have had a smoker in the gym or something like that. Which is basically like a professional sparring contest. Hard sparring for fun or something like that. They may have only had that, and then they had no other way to take a fight, so they just took a pro fight. So you can get that too, and so folks learn on the job, and it kind of slows whatever their development is. Like the MMA development process just needs a lot of work for all of the great many things that have happened in MMA, especially on the elite professional side. We celebrate all those, and those are the most important ones for sure. But the architecture of amateur MMA, the architecture of that bridge between amateurs and the pros, there are organizations that are trying to do something about it to varying degrees of success, but they got a lot of work. A lot of work. Hey, Luke, I saw the guys on Fight Disciples talking about meaningful penalties for missing weight. One suggestion was the automatic removal of 1 point in round 1 if you miss weight by more than 1 pound, excluding the 1 pound allowance granted for non-championship fights if applicable. What do you think of the idea? I get asked this all the time. Every year someone asks this, and the answer will remain the same. Namely, yes, it's great. And not only do we know it's great, you guys always, this has been my refrain for a long time. Luke, what do you think about open scoring? What about open scoring? What about open scoring? Yeah, what about open scoring? What about it? Until there is a meaningful set of data that can account for all the variables that need to be accounted for, anyone is allowed to have whatever opinion on open scoring that they want, unless their argument is principle based, like you should have it as a matter of principle. But if you're having it as a matter of like what effect it has on the sport, you just need a lot more information about it. It could be a good idea, it could be a bad idea, but without a lot of evidence to examine, we don't really know what to make of it. It's a similar kind of thing here, except there probably is more study that should be done about it. But Guilherme Cruz has covered organizations in Brazil. I think in Jungle Fight, Waleed Ismail's organization has done this. and they've actually had pretty good results. Now, nothing by itself is a panacea. Nothing by itself makes all of the problems go away. It's always going to be a competing sort of system. But what I would say is the early and excuse me, best available evidence indicates that it could be very, very good for MMA. I really am quite excited about it, and I'm actually one of the guys who it seems so hokey to do it, but I like the yellow and the red card system in Pride. I like the guys not so much getting fined for their purse, but these formal, declarative, clear warning systems. And again, even that is subject to abuse or misuse or improper use or underuse. There's nothing is going to solve it. But some of the things that you can borrow from other sports, it seems so weird to bring it to MMA because they're so distant. But there actually seems to be a method to the formality and the human psychology of it all that actually makes it work. Do I really have to do another Gareth Bale question? I'll probably save that one for later. Okay, it seems that inversions into footlocks in MMA, whether Z guard into knee bar, which is what what's the Peruvian guy's name? Claudio something. Forgive me. He's very good. That's what he hit from Z guard. Z guard is basically knee shield. For folks who don't know, knee shield, half guard. So one knee would essentially be you'd still have to be at an angle. One knee would be on one of their hips, and one of their knees would be, against one of their shoulders. And there's a whole framing system that goes into it. They call it Z guard. Knee shield's another name for it. And he hit that by stepping over and then rolling underneath and then taking the ankle there, or taking the ankle to snatch it for the knee bar. Or Imanari rolls into Ashigarami, rely on speed. Should this reason, well, they speed and timing, both. Should this reasonably lead us to conclude that the control mechanism for footlocks in MMA needs to evolve from a technical standpoint? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways where in regular jiu-jitsu, let's say if they're looking for heel exposure, right? So if my foot is flat on the ground, my heel is not really exposed. You have to get my heel off the ground, and there are ways to do that. There are ways you can create heel exposure. A lot of those ways may be applicable to MMA, but I would imagine that there is an MMA grappling system around some of these same considerations that have not been fully developed yet. Yes, I would say. Now, you're right. Like, there's a certain urgency with which Clay Guida suffered the knee bar. But again, I would also say there's a little bit of timing there. He has to move quickly when he does it, but he also has to make sure that he's hitting certain positions, which is not just a function of speed, but timing. He has to be there in a certain order in order for that to happen, and he did. So there's a little bit of both going on. Okay, I want to answer this one because this is a constant misunderstanding for MMA fans. Luke, curious if you have any insight about matching clauses when it comes to MMA contracts. For example, it seemed as though Kayla Harrison wanted to leave PFL, but was eventually forced to stay because PFL matched Bellator's offer. However, I believe her new deal is for 2 years. Do you think PFL would again have the right to match at the end of this new deal? Couldn't this in turn lead to a never-ending cycle of Kayla stuck in the PFL, even though she wants to leave? Yes, yes. Or do you think fighters are able to have these matching rights excluded from their contract if they are able to negotiate? So what ends up happening in other sports, or at least maybe in related combat sports, is she apparently, I think with the first contract she got, maybe they didn't think about it. Maybe it wasn't a part that they could actually negotiate out, but they probably didn't. The matching rights clause got left in. The question you have to ask yourself is, did they negotiate this time in getting an offer from Bellator that minimized or changed the matching rights clauses such that she's not trapped in a never-ending cycle? Because for folks who don't know how this goes, if they have matching rights in the way that which we traditionally understand them, there can be a period where once her last fight is over, she can then negotiate only with the existing promoter which she had had. And then once that period expires, usually it's 30 days, 90 days, whatever it is, then they can go and they can still talk to their existing promoter or the one they just had, but then they can take offers from anywhere. Anybody's open. It's true. Let everyone come. So then she goes and gets an offer from Bellator. I don't know what was in that Bellator offer to say whether or not matching rights were minimized or not. I'm going to guess that I, I don't know I don't know how doable these things are. What I would say is her manager, I believe it's Ali Abdelaziz, he probably should have negotiated into that some minimization of either, which you'll see with like boxers, for example, is sometimes they don't even have matching rights, but then sometimes what they'll have is they'll have like real minimal matching rights periods where fight is over on the last fight of their contract, and then it just goes right to open market, or the exclusive negotiating period is very short, or um, something like that. Or once they, or another one I'll see is the exclusive negotiating period is very short, and then once they go, then they're truly free. Where you could have a situation where they could get an offer from Bellator, and if they wanted to, they could take it back to UFC to like double it up or whatever. But they wouldn't be obligated to. They would actually be totally free from it. So there's a lot of different ways you can construct it. But to the contract she had, which put her back in this position, clearly what had ended up happening was she had the ability to then go seek an offer elsewhere. So she had a non-exclusive negotiating period at some point. She went and got one, but because they still had matching rights, once PFL made an offer it that was commensurate in value, which is essentially how they measure it, because again, they can't offer you the same things if one is on DAZN and one is on ESPN. These are not equivalent things, so there has to be a real monetary match in some kind of way. This is actually what happened with with Gilbert Melendez between Bellator and UFC, or was it Eddie Alvarez? There was a question of he got an offer one way, did Bellator really match it? Right? There's sort of a lot of question there. Because can Bellator actually match a UFC offer? This was again the Bjorn Rebney era. But to the point is, in this case, we don't have to deal with that. Bellator made the offer. PFL matched. At that point, Kayla has one of two options. One, you can sign that contract because you got an offer elsewhere, and then they match, and that's how the contract goes. Or you can just not fight. That's it. You couldn't be like, oh, PFL matched. I'm just going to ignore that. Once PFL matched the Bellator offer, game over. That's it. That's the whole ball game right there. You can't then go back to UFC and be like, okay, well, PFL matched. Do you want to get in on this? Or like, yeah, PFL matched. I still don't want to sign that. I'm just going to go to something else. You can't do any of that. None of that is on the table. Once they matched, ball game. So this is why it is possible. And again, I'm not a pro fighter. I'm not a famous person, but even in my contracts, my media contracts, at times there's been various provisions about matching offers, and nothing quite like this. But there's always every. This is not exclusive to fighting. Like many companies have stuff like this. But what I did in a lot of my contracts was try to negotiate out or minimize that as much as possible, as much as possible. So I am hoping that Kayla and her manager have at least put something in this new contract where you probably cannot eliminate matching rights if that seems impossible, but minimize it such that she has a little bit more latitude to do something else at the conclusion of it. Although you may be concerned and apprehensive of Elon buying Twitter, do you not agree the current version of Twitter is concerning, particularly the censorship that favor left-wing parties and ideologues? I'll come back to the left-wing part in just a second, but I am glad you asked about that because I do believe that I owe you guys a little bit more of an, how do I say this? Twitter has Twitter has the botching of what they did with the Hunter Biden story is bad. It's bad, right? Where you couldn't even share it on their platform because it was labeled as disinformation. Now, I know that there was some talk about, whether or not things that were illegally hacked or whatever, or hacked in some hacked material in general is not something that is a new policy that they allow on their platform. I've heard whatever. I'm not even going to get into that. But the point being is, um, it was an article in the New York Post about a certain subject right before a contentious and important election, and whether they did it for the express purposes of not quite election interference because it wasn't part of the voting considerations. It's a private company talking about people on a texting platform, but um, did they intervene in some kind of way to suppress a story that was mislabeled and otherwise critically important um, for the public to know. I mean, there's simply no denying that they did. There's simply no denying that they did. I would also say that even with my views on COVID probably being very different than the rest of yours and what constitutes good COVID protocol, what constitutes bad COVID protocol, I have also seen just a totally, not quite indiscriminate, but certainly inconsistent and at times deeply unfair method of treating conversations around COVID protocol for broader society, whether that be schools, whether that be the workforce, whatever, airplanes, whatever the case may be. It's also true that there's a lot of people saying incredibly stupid shit about it on this and using the latitude that is offered by speech platforms to say outrageous shit. However, I can admit that there are, and those are just two scenarios. There might be other ones, and those are two big ones. But certainly, you could imagine there'd be some other failures. They have had some serious issues, and it should be acknowledged as much. And I am acknowledging it flatly here that the parties at Twitter have um, they've had their share of failures in the way it's been conducted and run. So, in that sense, a new fresh face with a potentially new set of policies could lead to better outcomes as it relates to this. Not just those two issues, but these kinds of things. The issue, though, about the left wing parties and the ideologues, I mean, there is a lot of the right is endlessly in a pity party for themselves. They are endlessly confident that they are being discriminated against. They are endlessly confident that the world is out to get them. They are endlessly confident that were it not for their firearm and the gumption that God gave them, that the government would seize their property and bang their wives. There has always been a victim mentality in that side of it's certainly through at any point through my teens and 20s and 30s and 40s, if there has been a consistent thread in right wing politics, it's that a large part of it is grievance politics. Um, who did the study? Who did the study? Let me find it. There was a study conducted. Um, let's see, on Twitter. Who did it? Who did it? Let's see. Here we go. This is from. This is from. Okay, authors of the study followed 9,000 politically engaged Twitter users, half Democrat and half Republican, in October of 2020. The authors continued to keep track of their Twitter habits for 6 months after the 2020 election. The study did not find a disparity between how many users from each party were suspended, 7.7 of the Democrats compared to 35.6 of Republicans. Republicans of Twitter, however, shared, quote, substantially more news from misinformation, the study found. Now, of course, now that should be taken with a grain of salt. However, David Rand, a management professor at MIT who co-wrote the study, said the report didn't disprove bias allegations, didn't disprove them, excuse me, but showed how correlated misinformation sharing, and partisanship are. And in fact, what it actually showed, if you read the whole thing, this comes to us from. This is the name of the study. It is Twitter bias against conservatives? The challenge of inferring political bias in a hyper-partisan media ecosystem. The authors are Qi Yang, Mohsen Mosleh, Tahid Zaman, and David Rand. This is from, yes, I believe these guys are all from MIT. Yes, this is all from MIT, although there are corresponding Institute for Data Systems and Society, MIT, Science, Innovation, Technology, and Entrepreneurship Department at the University of Exeter Business School, Sloan School of Management, which of course is also MIT, Yale School of Management, Yale University, Department of Brain and Cognitive Sciences, MIT. Listen, I'm perfectly happy to entertain evidence, if any of you have any, from uh, anywhere that has been peer reviewed, anywhere that someone has taken a look at this, that can demonstrate that there is significant and vast right wing censorship. I do grant that there have been clear examples, major ones, like the Hunter Biden case, where that was an editorial choice made by the company that was, it seems impossible to divorce along partisanship lines. But day to day content, modern content moderation. I would need to be presented with evidence that shows that there is a vast right wing bias. I actually don't believe that to be nearly as true as the right makes it out. Again, I'm going to say it one more time. There has been a consistent thread through nearly 30 years of my walking life. It's really anywhere time I've had politics. My mom was a hardcore right winger. There is grievance politics and self-victimization and self-pity. These are the crews that often talk about Horatio Alger up by the bootstraps. This is the same group, but no one is more convinced that people are out to get evangelical Christians than evangelical Christians. No one is convinced that people are more out to get gun owners than gun owners. It's just this is how they have perceived their role in society and how larger groups tend to treat them. Which isn't to say that there aren't moments where this is quite true, or there couldn't be rather systems in place that make it true in certain situations. I'd be happy to look at any evidence that anybody has. LukeThomasNews@gmail.com. Not about guns or anything else, but about Twitter, about social media use. I'd be happy to take a look. I think if anything is true, it's that social media has been nothing but a megaphone and boon for for both sides in many ways, but it has, I think, much more given a bullhorn to right wing politics than they seem to have the ability to recognize. Mhm. All right, let's see what we got here. Come on now. Ask me about my wife. You're wasting your time. We know what Curtis Blaydes' most likely path to victory is, but what is Aspinall's? It seems to me that Aspinall has his work cut out for him. I think sticking behind a hardcore jab, a leg kick, stick and move, down blocking, sprawling, maybe taking Curtis Blaydes down, putting him on his back. Dude, Tom Aspinall is going to surprise some people. I don't mean necessarily that Curtis Blaydes can't win this. That's not what I mean. But like, for example, taking Volkov down and then going for the armbar. Like, what is to say that Aspinall wouldn't just take the bull by the horns and go for the takedown himself? Now you could say, well, Curtis Blaydes will stuff it. He's the better wrestler. He'll get up. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But a guy like Aspinall is going to have not just a lot of skills. Like he is, you can just see he has such a deft balance between understanding the inherent precariousness of fighting and how things can turn on a moment's notice and you have to be disciplined with confidence to try things. And he somehow has found a way to make that look like there's no central tension there, but there is central tension. He's special. He's special. So um, obviously, you could say you could do the prevent defense kind of game, jab, down block, sprawl, circle, that sort of thing. But I tend to think he's not going to try and win that one behind the jab the entire time. I tend to think he's going to want to do a lot more than that. Linear attacks up the middle is going to be another one as well for a guy who's going to come at you that way. So, yeah. Luke, do you see a future where MMA hardcore fan sentiment outweighs the casual fans? Nope. It'll never be that way. It'll never be that way. And who cares? Listen, it's I don't know how to quite contextualize it. You have to respect the size and significance of the casual fan base. They are annoying and they are stupid and they don't know anything. But they are the largest source of revenue. They are the ones, frankly, it's not us that make fights feel bigger, it's them, right? Because it's everybody. And they do bring something special to the game. But while I recognize that and appreciate that, I don't give a shit what they think. You know, listen, when it starts driving consumer preferences and then it affects all of us, like with these sort of YouTube boxing fights, right? I mean, these are broader conversations that we can have and we do. But like day to day, what do casual fans think? Like, Armin Soryukian is going to fight, or looks like he's going to fight Mateus Gamrot. What do casual fans think about? I don't give a fuck. I mean, like, who's the third best lightweight of all time? I mean, you and I can have that conversation. That's cool. What do casual fans think? Who gives a fuck? You know what I mean? Like, mm. uh, Okay, this is a really silly one, but I kind of like it. My roommates and I recently got into what I consider a stupid argument. I bet it was stupid. They claim that in a fight to death in hand-to-hand combat, the Spartan warriors from the past could kill a top 10 MMA fighter today. I claim that was absolutely ridiculous given how techniques have advanced and how humans have evolved, and they claim the brutality of the Spartans would win over. Dude, people don't know shit about fighting. Your roommates are very dumb. They're very dumb people who should be noted. I'm going to say this out loud. They don't know anything about fighting, clearly. The one area where you could, well, two areas where you could potentially see them having a little bit of a different argument, but it sounds like this was not part of your argument, which is that if we're talking weapons implementations, like if they have swords and shit, yeah, that would be different. Uh, and I don't know what the best practices of swords are. I mean, yeah, whatever. The other one would be, I mean, if you're in a fight to the death, gouging out somebody's eyes and pulling their hair and breaking their clavicle or attacking the spine, things that are flatly illegal in MMA, and things that people don't train, could potentially serve a very important role, right? Like, who cares if you're on, you know, side control if the guy's just digging his thumb into your eyeball? But in general, it's like, dude, my friend said that Fred Flintstone's car could go so much faster because his feet would move really fast, and that this would beat a modern day Ferrari. Luke, are my friends crazy? It's like, yeah, your friends are fucking clueless. I mean, that's a crazy thing to argue. It doesn't make any sense at all. At all. I mean, that's really rather ludicrous, quite candidly. That's pretty dumb. Pretty dumb. All right, let's take a look at the donations if there are any. I think there are some. Yeah, there are probably some. Let's pull them up on here. All right, let's see here. I think I pulled this up before and then fucking closed the window. So I'm very smart. I'm a very smart guy. All right, let's see. Uh, okay, let's go. And some of these were from before, so I apologize. Luke, as someone with ties to the Levant, talking about Beirut, Lebanon, please check out Jara fighting on the PFL Friday. His record is stellar. And the Jordanian was born, trains, and lives in Amman. I've been to Amman, Jordan. It's actually quite nice. Much love from Amman. Jordan is a beautiful place. So if you ever get a chance to go, you should. A lot of cats. Uh, if Tony, this is from Bashir, if Tony wins, could he call out, as he'll quote, Khabib's bitch Islam, like this, the air quotes, Tony's streak was longer and better and never got an undisputed shot. Guys who beat Tony get a title shot. So Beneil's next, then Islam if he wins. Fair? I mean, who cares what's fair? You know, fair ain't got shit to do with it. But I'll say this: if Tony beats Chandler, yeah, I mean, there's still too many. No, I wouldn't say title shot would work even if he calls it out. But I'd be curious to see who they give him. I'd be curious. That makes the McGregor fight pretty doable, or more doable anyway. Taylor and Serrano should headline their own pay-per-view, but to maximize exposure and their paycheck, what if instead they were the co-main to Triple G? Huh. Yeah, so it's a sort of age-old question. What would be better, for them to be the co-main event or for them to be the main event? I would still say because of the way that boxing is structured, it's not that you can't get quality main events. You can. But the issue ends up being, or sorry, quality co-main. But the issue ends up being that you still get something that you can know is not a lesser product exactly, but the stakes and significance and the grandeur of it all is a clear step down. And not in an insulting way, almost in a way where these guys aren't at this stage of the game yet. It does sort of draw a contrast. So while I get that it would put on a super card of sorts, and that's interesting, frankly, what I would, and it, would bring a lot of eyeballs to them. Frankly, what I would say is I think those ladies have earned the right already. But again, I actually feel like the rematch. I don't want Taylor Serrano 2 to be buried as a co-main event. That should really stand on its own. I know what you're saying, but no, not for them. It's a little too special. Uh, the MK and TFATK, I guess the fighter of the kids subreddits, blasted you for going off on BC for him ridiculing your pronunciation of Adesanya or Adesanya yesterday. That made me curious. How plugged in are you to people's perception of you online? Well, I'm a little bit more plugged in now, I guess. Yeah, listen, I mean, I, fine. I mean, people are, yes, you're absolutely allowed to have any criticism. I'm sure I didn't handle that as well as I could have. But BC and I are fine. We've been hanging out all day. We've already recorded a couple of interviews and some good content. Um, yeah, sure. I listen. They probably have a point, to be quite candid. But what I would say is, in defense, to the extent that there is one, I would just say that there are times. There have been. I've been doing this a while, and there has just been times where, like, without, I can either you can believe me or you don't. It's certainly up to you. But there have been times, like, out of good faith, where I have desperately tried to just do the right thing, and then you go, and then I have seen online reaction to it, and this could be something small like a pronunciation or some other kind of detail. And in doing that detail, it looks performatively like, "Hey, everyone, look at what I'm doing, and aren't I so great?" And what that has told me is, and I've told you guys the story before. I make horrible first impressions, and then usually over time, I'm able to win somebody back. Not always, but there is a lot of that has been the case, including my wife. So clearly, there is a way in which I talk that sometimes I'm not even aware of it, that is quite off-putting or looks a certain way. And I have no one to blame for this. I'm not trying to suggest it's everyone else's fault. I am just trying to say that, yeah, listen, did I handle it the best I could have? No, obviously not. But um, I am this. Someone on the live chat, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, had asked me, like, "Hey, dude, like, Izzy has told people how his last name is pronounced. How come you haven't done it yet?" I don't have a good answer for why I haven't done it that way. Like, that was the impetus for all of this. That was where this came from. Was like, you guys had asked me quite rightly, "Hey, man, this guy has told people this is how his name is. Why aren't you saying it that way?" What am I supposed to say to that? I don't have a good answer. Like that. And that's what I said in real time. What I said in real time was, um, "Yeah, I should." And so I wasn't even thinking about anything else. I wasn't even thinking about anything else. And I was just trying to do that. And then BC interrupted me. And I guess I have such a hair trigger at this point from, like, bad faith attacks, which is not his fault because I realize he's having a little more fun, that I overreacted. But I don't know. But I am sort of at the point with the broader question, which I asked BC with, which is, if I say Adesanya, then fine, that's the thing I've been doing all this time. But I'm ignoring the point that I just agreed to with another viewer on this live chat, that that's not the right way to do it. And then the instant I say it the correct way, here comes BC downhill, trying to accuse me of, being the snob at the country club, which is not what I'm trying to do. But does it come across that way? Probably it does. So that's why he reacted that way. So this is what I mean when I just say, like, I don't know what the right answer is, other than I'm just, all you can try to do, whether you fumble it out of the gate or whether you don't, is you just try to do the best you can with you try to do things for the right reasons. And yeah, again, like, I'll say it one more time, like, I probably overreacted. I definitely overreacted. But I hope everyone understands that's where it came from. You guys you not only allowed to challenge me, you should, and you did, and you were right. So if I'm saying you're right, what am I supposed to do after that other than begin to implement change, right? Like, isn't that the whole point? So obviously, getting better pronunciation does not have to be tied to yelling at BC. Those are separate, and that's the failure there. So I'll take blame for that. But I do hope, as if there's one message beyond, yes, I handled that poorly, is that if you guys are going to challenge me, and I agree you're correct, I think it'd be worse after that to ignore it. I need to implement it in a more humane and rational and level-headed way. But I, I don't feel like I should just ignore that. And I was trying to, however else it came across, I was just trying to do that. That's it. Luke, where's the second episode of High Court? It is currently, it's on the website. We haven't made it public. It's ready to go. We're just waiting for the news cycle to kind of churn a little bit before we let it go because it's kind of tied to. We could put it out now, and I don't think it'd do as well as if we waited a little bit. I think it will do a lot better. So we'll see. Luke, did you see Mike Tyson release a peekaboo? Thank you, Joe, for the question, and Will for the previous question I just answered. Did you see Mike Tyson release a peekaboo instructional for MMA? Just how applicable could such a trunk movement heavy style be in the MMA meta? So that's on BJJ Fanatics, or I guess they call it their. Well, that was how the company started. Then they started getting into like all kinds of instructionals, and one of them was, or one of the areas of them is striking. So they have striking fanatics as well, and it's on striking fanatics as I understand it. I have not seen it yet. So without seeing it yet, I'm a little bit. Who did I ask about this? Maybe it was like Trevor Whitman years ago. It may not be him. I honestly don't know who told me this, so I want to be very clear about that. God, who was that? Because I can hear I remember what they told me more than anything else, if I don't remember who it was, which was that a lot of the leaning. Now, this would be, Mike Tyson's peekaboo was kind of fast and designed to almost freeze you or make you miss by virtue of how quickly he is changing angle side to side and then covering distance with it at times, either changing stances or whatever. But like a lot of the lean stuff is a problem in a sport where you can throw kicks and knees. This is another reason why you don't see a lot of guys rolling under punches. Like I do think that there is a bigger role for rolling. I mean, how many times have you guys seen a guy throw a punch and then rather than roll as he's expecting the hook to come, they just kind of lean back. But when they lean back, they misjudge it, and boom, they get hit. Um, so there's a reality there too about if you roll underneath, you can also in a sport where you can kick a knee, that can be a problem. So what I would have to say is I am certain that there is an implementation for that peekaboo style that exists. I'm sure that that's real. Um, but I have not seen the instructional, and I'm guessing that whatever he is showing is going to be in many ways boxing specific, and there's going to have to be some kind of adaptation to it to make it work. All of these things, not all of them. I bet that in a style as coherent and as effective, especially because part of what makes peekaboo work is evasion, right? I'm going side to side, I'm getting out, and there is rolling, and there's a lot of angle changing. That has to be valuable. That has to be valuable. But the distance from which you operate could potentially be a problem for some of the implementation, as well as other potential setups and exits. So I need to review it. I would say that there's going to be broad swaths that are going to be valuable, but all of it has to be adapted or like retrofitted for MMA. Do you agree with Tony Ferguson's media day comments? How much of his plight was his own doing, and how much do you know about his current coaching situation? I do not know about his current coaching situation, and of course, my plight I have to accept as part of my responsibility, of course, and all of my responsibility to the extent. Doesn't mean things don't happen to us, but like what I'm saying is, yes, like is there obviously a case to be made that a guy like Tony is responsible for how his career turned out? Yes, everyone has some responsibility to bear for this. This is not a controversial thing, I don't believe. But and this is what I basically said on MK. I'll just going to repeat the basic insight, which was when I heard him say that, it really bummed me out. Not just because it hurt to hear someone who was clearly, you know, uh, upset and hurt. It seemed, and frankly, a lot more than that. But it's like, why didn't he see this 2, 3 years ago? Because the situation didn't really change in terms of management and how fighting pay works and everything else. I just sort of believe that, like at 38 years old, he probably has a recognition that there's not a lot of time left, and that potentially some of the things he wants to accomplish, and potentially some of the money he wanted to make, there's a decent chance that it won't happen now. Now, I want to be very clear. I am not making a claim that he can't or won't win a UFC 274. You guys know I have been adamant, speaking of being wrong, that I have buried guys in the past and they have shown me life in ways that I just never imagined. I had to really rethink things. So I do think that there are a lot of external factors and a lot of just sort of challenges about Michael Chandler in particular that make winning on Saturday difficult. But I am not suggesting that I can guarantee a victory or a loss for Ferguson. I cannot. Still, it's just 38 years old at 155 pounds. It's just a very very difficult place to be, and so it bummed me out because it seemed like he had a recognition that, um, dude, the game is brutal for just about everybody. You could be a really high achiever, and Tony is an extremely high achiever, and it's still effing brutal in terms of how broken it will leave you in terms of your body, and potentially on how anyone manages their money, how it could leave you financially, and so it's one of those, you know, as a media guy, listen, I could be fired and out of the sport tomorrow, right? But I've been around long enough, man. I've been like covering this for like a while, like almost 2 decades. Not quite that long, but a decent chunk, man. I have seen careers begin, middle, and end. Several rounds of them. Seen generations come and go. And it's at the very end that they begin to realize that sometimes stuff did not work out the way that they wanted. Because I think a lot of us, got whether you work in an office or an octagon, I think a lot of people, probably overestimate how long the good times are going to roll. But it's this is a that his line of work is an extremely difficult one, and extremely the place where you can have the most amount of success is a very small window. Dude, this is why fighter pay matters, y'all. This is why fighter pay matters, man. There has got to be an even trade. Prize fighting, what they give up to do all the things that make what happens, that financial compensation has to be there, and that doesn't solve all the problems either. Some will spend it all, some will get robbed, some will, who knows. Any manner of things are going to separate an athlete from their money in any sport. We all know the stories. Nevertheless, that is not the point. At that point, you can almost, if not squarely, blame them. They get on a significant grade. They take on a significantly greater chunk of the responsibility for what has happened. But that is not where we are. We are not in a place where you can look at the fighters and say, "What did you do when you managed the money?" Yes, of course. Even if you got 10K, 100K, 100 million, it's a question of financial management. But if you have been chronically underpaid, and when I say chronically underpaid, I mean by several orders of magnitude, you have and now that whatever you got is, even that window is coming to a close, man. Like that should not be happening. I'm really not okay with it. I'm not okay with it. It is, I don't know if unforgivable is the word, but it's an unjustifiable imbalance. The current imbalance is just unjustifiable. And people can dress this up in whatever they want about, some made up concern or made up belief that they actually already make enough, that the trade is even, that it's really the UFC owners that deserve the most. They can lie to themselves. It's not a monopoly. They can say whatever they want to themselves about it. The facts remain what they are. They get less than 20% or at 20% of revenue, and this is not an even trade. This is not an even trade, and there's a lot of good reasons why it's not. We've been over them a million times, but it's not. And the fighters know it, and most of you know it too. It's not an even trade, and I'm not going to sit here and say that everyone is evil for denying the fighters. You can believe that if you want. I'm not here making that claim. I'm just making the claim that until that distribution is more equitable, um, we're not doing this correctly. We're not. And if someone like Tony is going to sacrifice everything he sacrificed, you imagine all the time away from family, all the pain, all the suffering, all the misery he had to endure, for year after year after year after year. Yes, and success and highs and all that kind of stuff too. But being denied a title shot for so long, or at least at a bare minimum, just having to constantly win one more and one more and one more. And then here he is at 38 asking, what did all that get me? You know, it did not get him what I think he was owed. It didn't. Um, and here we are. Are Silva's fighting fam? Are Silva's a fighting fam, or is it Brazilian version of Johnson? Every other. Oh, There's a lot of syllables, yes. Sorry. I went to an all English school. I spoke Spanish with mom and mixed English and Spanish with dad. I speak fluently. A little effort at home consistently goes a long way. Didn't want you to worry so much about your daughter. Well, it's very nice to hear. Yes. Right now, my daughter's favorite movie is Gato con Botas, which is Puss in Boots on Netflix. Gato con Botas, Poppy. That's the one she wants to see all the time. So we make her watch it in Spanish. It's actually pretty funny. It's weird. Salma Hayek is the voice of the female cat in English and Spanish, but Antonio Banderas, Banderas, however I'm supposed to say it at this point, uh, he doesn't do the Spanish version, even though he is Spanish. I don't quite understand what happened there. But the dude who does the voice if of the cat in Spanish is fucking hilarious. He's great. How would a prime Hendricks, Johnny Hendricks, fare against the current UFC welterweight top 10? Like the prime version? Shit, really well. You wonder about the Colbys and the Kamarus because of the relentless takedown ability. Not that they were better or worse wrestlers, but they definitely were going to have a better gas tank. So you do wonder about them, but his power was enough to probably give a lot of people problems, like Jorge, Gilbert, maybe a Luque. And again, there's sort of that Bilal Muhammad question about where he fits into that picture as well, because obviously he has made him turn himself into an elite welterweight. I think he probably is top three, certainly no worse than top five, but I don't think he'd be. And again, we don't know if Colby really holds that position anymore by virtue of some of these broader considerations that we've raised, but you get the idea. In my opinion, Fedor in his prime is a top three heavyweight of all time. Yes. Amazing grappling, fast and hard-hitting hands, crazy durability, and a nonstop pace. Yeah, sure. He had the speed of a middleweight with the body of a sort of a puffed-up heavyweight, and it was a formidable combination. When Gaethje wins, his opponents are never the same. Tony, Vic, Barboza, Cowboy. Does this negatively impact how fans rate his wins as they age? It might. It might. Although, in the case of Barboza and Cowboy, they've taken a lot of damage, and I think Vic just got put into a bad way after that loss. But to your point, and the Tony beating was just a sustained beating. But it could, yes, that could be something. Someone says if Michael asks if Rose and Justin win, where do you rank Trevor Whitman among MMA coaches? I, I don't. So I'm not going to do like the GOAT ranking, but I'll treat it like a stock index, right? Like a stock market. I would have him as like the blue chip stock if he wins that one. There's been times where it's been traded, like Greg Jackson was up and so forth. Javier Mendez when they had three champions at AKA at the same time. Then again, there's a question about how much was he doing the coaching versus others or whatever. But still, if we're giving him that credit to any meaningful degree. But if I would say that with what he's done with Kamaru, if these guys win it, you would have to put him as the top coach in MMA at the moment for sure. What kind of fight would make Tony retire? Probably another bad beating, which against Michael Chandler is possible. It's possible. Did I watch yesterday's Madrid match? Yeah, I did. I just first half wasn't that great. Second half wasn't that great. But after the 90th minute, it was fucking amazing. You know, I said it, man. They like, dude. This is the thing. It's like, who's the better team? Dude, fucking Liverpool's the better team by a considerable margin. But Madrid wins games that they are not supposed to all the time, all the time. And so once you realize that, and these guys have these incredible bursts of inspiration, uh, you gotta, you just have to accept that. All right, I'm first in line to hate on BC for his BS. I understand there are things going on behind the scenes we don't know about, but you chastising Brian on air and his responses are a lot worse than some jokes or a longer show, in my opinion. Yeah, fair. There, I accept the criticism. I accept it. I I cannot tell you that I handled that well. I did not. Um, I think there is a core of a genuine point, as I've explained, but sure, I accept responsibility. I didn't think it was that big a deal, but I guess you guys did. So you learn something new every day. I'm not undermining it. I'm saying that, like, again, you have to understand there's a certain way I speak that sometimes it really pisses people off that I don't realize in real time in the way that I should. It's been a consistent problem, and this is probably clearly one such case. Josh has donated to keep it look fresh. Thank you, buddy. What MMA coach camp do you think can advance Hamzat's skill set the most? I have no idea because we haven't seen it tested, and what he's got has been pretty good. MMA All Stars is a very good camp. It's a elite camp, so I don't really have any desire to see him move. Has Dominic Cruz's style been solved to an extent? Yes, I think it has been. Not completely. I mean, he's always changing patterns and whatnot. But I think people realized how to get a better read on his timing and his entries and what he was essentially trying to set up with what particular moves and steps and looks he was offering. Haircut fund. Thank you. Someone says, and they had nice things to say. Alba Madrid and Galatasaray. Tom Bien. Yeah, I was there for. Well, I wasn't in the stadium for it, but I was in Turkey, in Galata, next to the Galata Tower, for a cool Champions League game. Back in what year was that? Was it 2014? Something like that. What is an effective and simple strength training bit? What I would tell you is you guys should not ask me this. You should ask an expert this, or you should get online. What I would tell you is if you're looking for a very basic split, there's a million free ones online. Johnny Candido has one. I've looked at some ones you can get that are in various places. Kettlebell Kings, if you're into that kind of a thing. Guys, this is the golden age of fitness. There has never been this much good information online. A lot of it behind paywalls. That's true. A lot of it behind paywalls. But at the same time, um, a lot of it's free as well. So much free information. I couldn't even tell you what a simple strength split is without really knowing who you are, without knowing your goals, your needs, how much of a relative novice or not you are. This is only something that a capable professional can really give you any meaningful answer to. But what I can say is, what I can encourage you to do is, and if you have any more questions, you can follow up with me because I don't want your donation to go in vain. LukeThomasNews@gmail.com. I can follow up and send you some stuff. But there's tons of free stuff out there, tons. And especially if you're a novice, go get the free stuff first, kick it into gear, see what it does for you, and then you can go from there. Okay? All right. Thank you guys so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. Let's see. Tomorrow there's going to be a reaction show for Bellator and MK. We're going to do MK regular show. It's going to be off the rails. Then we've got some cool stuff working right after this. I have a cool thing to do downstairs. I think you guys are really going to like one of those tomorrow. So we're doing two of them. And then Saturday, we're doing the companion podcast and a post-fight show. Busy, busy weekend. If you haven't gotten your Mother's Day flowers, go get them. Go get your Mother's Day flowers, okay? Don't wait. Don't leave mom hanging or whatever. Take care of that. All right. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Until next time, stay frosty.